In the eighth lesson of Mastering the 8 Executive Functions, we are going to focus on the last 2 executive functions, which are impulse control and emotional regulation. We are going to start with impulse control, which is the ability to think before acting. Impulse control allows us to respond to situations rather than reacting. It allows us to resist temptation, urges, or impulses, and it enables us to set priorities and withstand the urge for impulsive actions or responses. I'm going to have us head over to our classroom, and let's take a look at the impulse control activity, which you can find under assignments titled Impulse Control Activity. So go ahead and download this assignment and let's take a look. We all have certain events that we respond to impulsively. For some, it may be words or actions done by those around us, not knowing how to answer a question maybe, or working through a problem, or maybe it's blurting out answers or thoughts. Take a moment to think of some situations that cause challenges with impulse control. So I'd like for you to list the event or trigger, list the behavior, and then list the consequence of that behavior. So here are some examples. Maybe a trigger or event that causes you to struggle with impulse control is that somebody says something that you do not particularly agree with. And when this happens, you interrupt and you tell them, wow, that is really stupid. The consequence of that behavior is that the person's feelings are probably going to be hurt, and they aren't likely to trust you or share with you in the future. Another example could be coming across a math problem that you cannot determine the correct answer for. Maybe it's especially challenging or you're really struggling to move forward. In that moment, you might find yourself getting really angry and you then throw your textbook across the room. What is the consequence of that behavior? Well, the textbook could likely be damaged, the assignment doesn't get done, you may get in trouble by your teacher or a parent. There's a whole list of different consequences that can likely occur due to that behavior. What I would like for you to do is follow the same model and provide a trigger or event that you are currently struggling to manage your impulses with, or perhaps you have a trigger or event that in the past you have struggled to manage your impulses with. I'd like for you to list at least 3, and if you have more, you're more than welcome to add them. So go ahead and pause the video and take some time to complete this activity, and when you are finished, you can resume the classroom lesson. All right, let's focus on some challenges that are related to impulse control. If you were struggling to complete the activity, as we go through some of the challenges, you might identify a few that you relate to, and maybe if you need it, this can help you to move forward with the assignment if you were feeling stuck. So some challenges, one that we kind of touched on is communication. So blurting out answers or blurting out random thoughts on irrelevant topics during a conversation. Maintaining attention. If you are working on an assignment and your phone starts to ring, you may have the impulse to grab your phone and check it and see who's calling, and you may struggle to manage that impulse and maintain your focus and attention on the task at hand, which would be the assignment, and find yourself distracted, impulsively looking at your phone. Avoiding distractions. So just like with the phone, maybe somebody's walking through the classroom, walking in front of you while you're working on the computer. Maybe you hear a conversation taking place. Any kind of distraction like that, it may cause some difficulty to manage your impulses to either listen in, participate in that distraction somehow, ultimately causing you to struggle with avoiding that distraction and being successful in maintaining your attention and managing that impulse. Reacting to situations can be challenging, especially if you are, working on something difficult. Maybe somebody says something that you do not agree with. If your feelings are hurt, anything where you feel like you have a strong reaction to that is hard for you to control. And then lastly, thinking through decisions. So those with impulse control challenges may find it difficult to think through a decision and provide a response or solution that they have thought through. If thinking through decisions is difficult for you, you're likely to be super quick to answering or coming up with a solution and later realize maybe I didn't think that all the way through. As I've gone through these challenges, you can, if you need to, you can go back to the activity and provide further examples. And if not, go ahead and head over to the discussions, and under the discussions tab, you'll see impulse control. And I'd like for you to share a challenge you experience with impulse control and then a strength you have with impulse control. So take a minute to respond to this discussion question and then go ahead and resume the lesson video. All right, now that we have gone over some challenges, I'd like for us to focus on strategies to help combat impulse control challenges. The first strategy is practical and easy, and it's simply minimizing distractions. When you're working on your homework, when you're working on any kind of task, you're going to want to minimize any distractions that are present. So that may be putting your phone on silent or putting your phone in your backpack so you don't even have to feel the urge to check it because it's out of sight and out of mind. If you're working on your computer or your laptop, minimizing the amount of windows and internet tabs that are opened up, shutting off notifications on your laptop, anything to help minimize notifications or potential distractions from popping up so that you're able to maintain focus and attention on the task at hand. Establishing rewards and reinforcement when you are finished or you meet an expectation that you've set for yourself to help you to maintain attention. So for example, if you really struggle to avoid distractions or focus on what you need to be focusing on, you can set a goal for yourself to work and focus for 15 minutes. You can set a timer, and once that 15 minutes is up, you can reward yourself maybe by checking your phone for a few minutes, listening to a favorite song, going and grabbing a snack, any kind of reward that is reinforcing to you, which means that if a reward is reinforcing, then you are likely to engage in that behavior again because you know that you'll be getting something desirable at the end. Designating a work area is also helpful because if you designate an area of work that is organized, distraction-free, and an area that you consistently go to complete tasks, your brain will start to recognize it as the work area and naturally will help you to get in the zone of I am working right now. I need to maintain focus. This is what I do when I'm sitting at this desk. Reflection. If you notice that you are engaging in behaviors that are due to a difficulty controlling your impulses, then taking time to reflect on why that is, when it's happening, and how it usually results, how the behavior that you're engaging in, how that ends up, what consequences end up happening. So in that activity that I had each of you work on, you had the opportunity to reflect on some of your behaviors and what triggers those behaviors, and then the consequences that come from engaging in those behaviors. Hopefully that gave you an opportunity to reflect and take a closer look at what it is that you struggle with in terms of controlling impulses. Sometimes what really helps foster change is awareness. And so having that awareness can help you to be more mindful in the event that a situation like that comes up again. The last strategy I have listed on here is pretty simplistic, it's practical, and it is counting to 3. So you are starting to build that awareness of areas or triggers or events that cause you to struggle with impulse control. Having that awareness will allow you to automatically get in the habit of thinking, okay, this is something that I often struggle with. And so you can start to use that awareness and pair the response of counting to 3 when those events take place. For example, if you know that you are working on, if math is such a hard subject for you, and that's your trigger, right? Working on math assignments, and you see yourself approaching a question or a particular problem that is especially challenging, and when this happens, you usually respond by throwing something or crinkling up your paper. You can start to get in the habit of, okay, this problem is especially challenging. I need to take a second, take a breath, count to 3 before I make any further moves. And sometimes that's all we need, is just simply giving ourselves a couple seconds to reset, recenter, and we can better respond to the situation. Okay, if you guys heard that really loud noise, it was my phone falling from my desk, but luckily it's still active, no damage. Okay, all right, so now that we have taken some time to discuss impulse control, I would like for you to head over to the assignments and click on the assignment titled Impulse Control. And I'd like to know what strategy you would like to apply to address a particular challenge that's related to impulse control. So let me know what strategy you think is going to be helpful for you, and I want to know how you're going to modify this strategy and apply it to meet your specific needs. You can complete this assignment just like you have with all the other assignments similar to this by just leaving a comment and sharing the strategy and how you're going to modify it. When you're finished, we are going to then transition to discussing emotional regulation. All right, so emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is the ability to process and alter how we feel and respond to external events. Essentially, what emotional regulation is a function that allows us to manage our emotions, not allowing them to drive our behavior, especially negative emotions like anger, frustration, and anxiety. What this means in summary, is that we are able to regulate our emotions and center ourselves to avoid negative emotions like anger and frustration and anxiety. So, what does emotional regulation look like? What do challenges that are relating to emotional regulation, how do they come up? So, emotional regulation challenges can include test taking difficulties. So, those who have difficulty regulating themselves may struggle with test performance because they have a difficult time regulating themselves and often feel a lot of anxiety when taking tests, and therefore aren't able to perform to the best of their ability because they're not able to regulate themselves in response to an external event. And so in this case, the external event would be the test taking. Perfectionism is another challenge related to emotional regulation, and it's usually a result of anxiety. So maybe working on writing assignments. You may struggle to complete assignments like that, where you may take a lot longer than necessary because you are striving for perfection, and this is often a result of the inability to manage and regulate emotions. Amplifying emotions is also another challenge, and what I mean by this is that if you are feeling sad or frustrated or angry about something, which is often it can be an appropriate response. Those emotions are a part of our life, and they're a part of the human condition. However, it's not always necessary to allow them to take over in the way that they do, which means kind of just like amplifying it. So maybe you received a bad, like a D, for example, or a C on a paper that you spent a lot of time working on. I might feel angry about that. Most people might feel pretty angry and upset by that, but it's something that needs to be an appropriate amount of anger. Amplifying that emotion might look like, you're ripping up the paper, you are like yelling at the teacher, yelling at, a parent, or something that's just, inappropriate. And so often those with emotional regulation challenges may find themselves amplifying emotions, taking it to the extreme when they don't necessarily have to do that. Challenging tasks are also a challenge because those with difficulties regulating themselves may find that their emotions are heightened, and they are feeling particularly anxious, feeling particularly angry, frustrated, annoyed, and struggle to center themselves to continue working. They kind of let that emotion take over. Receiving feedback may also be a challenge because if you receive feedback that isn't favorable, it might cause you to feel pretty angry or frustrated. And then the last challenge I have listed is self-advocacy. Self-advocacy simply means just sticking up for yourself or speaking up on behalf of you and what your needs are. So say you're not doing so well in a class, you can advocate for yourself by arranging a time to meet with the teacher, to receive feedback or get help on a particular concept or lesson topic. Or you may advocate for yourself by raising your hand in the middle of class to clarify something the teacher has stated or better understand a concept the teacher has just explained. If you or an individual struggles with emotional regulation, they are likely not able to advocate for themselves due to anxiety or fear of criticism, or getting or feeling, just too anxious to ask those kinds of questions or speak up for themselves in front of a large group, for example. If any of this was a little bit confusing or you need further clarification, please just go ahead and leave me a comment under the discussions. There's a discussion titled Lesson Questions. I know that with impulse control and emotional regulation, those executive functions deal with a lot of language and concepts that may be a bit confusing for you. So if that's the case, just let me know so I can better clarify and provide you with the guidance you need to understand the concepts in this lesson. If you are feeling comfortable and familiar and have a good understanding of what I covered so far, then I'd like for you to go ahead and leave a comment in the emotional regulation discussion question and share with me a challenge that you experience with emotional regulation. And then go ahead and share a strength that you have. Whenever you are done, you can go ahead and resume the lesson video, and we will discuss strategies that are related to emotional regulation. All right, so I have organized some strategies to help combat emotional regulation challenges. The first is a solutions web, and this is an activity that you are able to complete. You're welcome to either work on this, to pause the video and get started on this now, or you can work on it at the end of the lesson. This is something I think it's kind of fun, in my opinion, and allows you to reflect and determine, alternative explanations or outcomes of certain situations. So let's take a look at it. Feeling frustrated or angry or anxious, as I mentioned, is part of the human condition. I used, negative emotions to describe those feelings earlier. And what I want to say is they're negative in the way that they're not favorable. It's not really fun to feel angry or frustrated. However, it's okay to feel those things, and it's not something that we really can avoid. It's a part of our life and a part of the human condition. And so what we can do and what we can control is how we respond to those emotions. So creating a solutions web helps students to identify the problem and several possible solutions and outcomes. So what you can do is place a problem that you're experiencing in the center of the web, and you can start to look at potential solutions or outcomes or explanations of the problem that you have in the center. And so in this example, they put, my swim coach yelled at me in front of the class. And here are some examples of what possible solutions could be. So you could quit camp, you could ask to change another coach, remind yourself that you're doing your best, talk to the coach before class, compliment him when he says something nice to me, right? There's just so many different possible outcomes. What I want for you to do is identify a particular problem or area in your life that you've either experienced in the past that caused you to struggle with regulating your emotions. Maybe something that made you feel frustrated, angry, anxious, really upset. and explore different solutions to those to that problem. So you can print this out and fill it out and scan it and upload it and submit it into the assignment returns folder, or if you'd like, you're happy to follow this same kind of model. Maybe you could create your own solutions web in Microsoft Word. I'm happy with whatever is easiest for you as long as you are able to complete this assignment. Okay, so let's continue on with strategies. Identifying negative self-talk, of course, is going to be helpful. Like I mentioned, change really starts with awareness, and so just starting to become more aware of negative self-talk that you may engage in is going to be really helpful. Establishing coping strategies, so maybe you've learned over time that listening to music or an inspirational podcast or spending a couple minutes with a pet is something that helps to recenter you and allow you to better regulate your emotions. Scheduling breaks can also be very helpful, as if you are working on tasks that are particularly challenging, giving yourself breaks to recenter is going to be helpful and help you to avoid feelings of being overwhelmed or frustrated. Setting small goals. So if you're working on a particularly challenging task and it's overwhelming, maybe it's causing anxiety or frustration, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable items is going to be really helpful, because it allows you to, number one, you'll see an end in sight, and number two, you know exactly what you need to focus on. Lastly, using a timer. So if you're scheduling breaks, you can use a timer. Maybe you are setting a timer to work for 15 minutes. Setting that timer, again, that's going to be helpful because you are going to be able to recognize and acknowledge that there is an end in sight is near. The last assignment that I have for you is to go ahead and determine what strategy you think would be most helpful for you, and how are you going to modify this strategy to meet your specific needs. That is going to wrap up our 8th lesson. So as of now, we have covered all of the 8 executive functions. So if you have any questions about this lesson or any questions relative to the 8 executive functions we've covered throughout this course, please let me know by providing a comment in the lesson questions discussion tab. Otherwise, we will spend our last lesson just reviewing everything that we've learned and organizing all of the strategies that we've identified to be helpful in mastering the 8 executive functions. I will see you guys in the next